good news now. The city of Joburg and Tshwane are cracking the whip on people who have outstanding water and electricity accounts. Gauteng threatened to take Tshwane to court if the lights at the Hatfield station were not restored immediately. However, ended up paying its 10 million rand debt. But what are the legalities behind this, especially if you are a business or an organization and you find yourself in the dark? Law expert Benedict Phiri joins us now to shed some light on this for us, and excuse the pun for that. Mr. Phiri, thank you for your time, and good morning to you. Is all of this, showcase we're seeing on social media even legal?
I think it's certainly dubious from a legal perspective. This is municipalities taking the law into their own hands, which is absolutely unlawful. But I imagine that from the perspective where they're coming from, they believe that they can chance it because they think that these businesses haven't been in peaceful possession, if we call it that, of these services, which is really what is the fundamental criterion around whether these businesses can actually be successful in obtaining interdicts. They'd have to show that they were in peaceful possession and that their possession was disturbed in the sense that their services were cut off and it was done unlawfully so. What the municipalities will obviously say would be, well, we've been trying to communicate with these businesses for years, which is what we've heard, and we've threatened them over a number of, a period of time that if these accounts are not brought up to date, then we will terminate the services. And certainly they'd say it's, completely unjust for these businesses not to pay their accounts to the tune of millions of rands in the current climate.
Right. But surely, with what we've seen from different businesses, as well as some government departments taking, of course, the cities of Tshwane, for example, even Joburg to court, in terms of saying that those disconnections were irregular, does it mean that the city of Tshwane didn't do necessary due diligence here when it comes to ensuring that before they approach the business, then they are certain that indeed they are owing and their accounts are not up to date?
Yeah, in the ordinary course, the city of Tshwane would have had to approach a court before it disconnects these services,
right.
and requested a court to order the disconnection of the services for a lack of payment. So they've actually jumped the gun and taken the law into their own hands and said, well, let the business go to court rather than us, and we'll see if we can be successful in defending it. It is a question, as I said, whether these businesses will be able to reapply, but in the ordinary course, they should be able to, because this is actually the municipalities taking the law into their own hands.
Yeah. Benedict, what reputational damage is at stake here when you talk about the reputation of these businesses? Because, I'm sure you've witnessed the naming and shaming on social media, the city of Tshwane taking pictures, naming these businesses. What does it do to their reputation?
Yeah, I think certainly the city of Tshwane and the Gauteng municipalities are opening themselves up for claims that may be linked to a suspension of, business operations as a result of the unlawful termination of these services. From a reputation perspective, I think these businesses have to show that this actually injured their reputation to the extent that it was detrimental to their business. But certainly, these municipalities are skating on thin ice with respect to, what they're actually doing with the naming and shaming and also the summary termination of these services.
Yeah. Everyone's been wondering, why is it that all of a sudden the money is there to make payment? What does it mean for these businesses that have been owing and now are suddenly paying, of course, these debts? just legally so. In your opinion, I suppose, where does the money now suddenly come from?
I think the conduct of these businesses, some of the names that we see, is really quite shocking. To begin with, to say, well, that a business of such reputation is not contributing to the betterment of the society that we all live in. So I think that is actually quite alarming and shocking, and to an extent probably deserves such a shocking response as well. So I don't know what has been happening all this time, especially when you hear reports that some of these businesses didn't even respond to correspondence. So it's not a question of a misunderstanding, of an incalculation of the wrong account, etc. It's literally them ignoring their duties as corporate citizens effectively of these municipalities.
So if your account has been up to date, you've been paying up your bill, and yet you have been shamed or rather disconnected in terms of your water and electricity supply, what's your advice then? What's the legal recourse and the route that these businesses can take?
My advice would be focused mainly around any loss of patrimony that flows from that unlawful termination, and less about reputational damage per se, because we know that a business is not a person, a physical human person, and does not necessarily have the same personality rights that a person like you and I would have.
Right.
So, a loss of reputation is slightly different to prove for a business, but certainly a loss of profit, which would certainly have been foreseeable by these municipalities as a result of the cutoff or termination of those services. Certainly, if it is substantial enough to progress through the courts, I would say that these businesses who are in the right should seriously look at taking action, at least to ensure that they're not left out of pocket as a result of an unlawful and wrongful termination of services.
Absolutely, because that does affect them directly in terms of operations. But thank you so much, Benedict Phiri, law expert there, telling us about the legalities of what we've all been witnessing, I suppose, Gareth, the cutting off, disconnections of electricity and water in both Joburg and Tshwane.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people, as far as estates are concerned as well, they're homeowners, or perhaps they're even renting, whatever the situation is, in housing estates. And I saw one or two tweets, might have been one yesterday, where the power supply to the entire estate was cut off. And that's where the problem comes in.
Right.
The landlords of the estates might not be paying, or the what do you call them, the governing bodies, or
Absolutely,
the councils or whatever aren't paying. But those living in the estate are
paying.
But now their power is off.
Right.
And this is why it's going to get so messy. So I'm sure we're going to speak to Benedict Phiri a couple of times as people get more and more angry.